You know, that's like just your opinion, man.
I don't even know if my screen share went off or not. So yeah, it's going to be the wing it version of the audio opinion show because my computer is in pain. So that sound that you hear over the web is my MacBook Retina screaming in pain that I'm killing it. But anyway, believe that we're live. Welcome to the Audio Opinion Show. Welcoming my friends from around the world-ish who all do audio stuff. And we're going to talk about audio stuff because that's what we do. And, you know, we're going to chat for half an hour, 45 minutes or so. And, you know, feel free to comment on the YouTube as we go or whatever. If you're wondering how to get on this thing, all you have to do is go to my YouTube channel and find my address, which is on there. Shoot me a note and you can be on with us as well. And we can listen to your opinion. So let's go to the most important of all things, which is the poll. And we are going to launch poll number 1. And the question is, how is the actor who played Wesley, how is his last name pronounced? Is it 1, Eelwes? Is it 2, Elways? Is it 3, Elwes? Is it 4, Elwes? Or is it 5, Yules? Or is it 6, I have no idea? Make your entries quickly. Just go as fast as you can. I actually don't get to vote this time because I don't have a separate computer. And it looks like all the votes are in and we were going to end the poll. And the winning vote is, I have no idea. And that's what I would have voted because I don't know either. So there you go. That is one piece of Princess Bride trivia that I actually don't freaking know the answer to. So there you go. So that's something that we can all check back later to figure out what was how do you say the name? Because I don't know. If Jason Glass was on here, he would immediately tell us because he's a huge Gary Elwes, something fan. Anyway, so now let's figure out what we're going to talk about. So here's our choices. Favorite vintage, quote, vintage speaker system. Feedback eliminators. Ooh. Third choice, on-off versus mute button consoles versus other weird things that we think are weird on consoles. 4, lav mics, cardioid versus omni. Point source boxes, do we fly them horn up or horn down? And why? And 6, do we patch 1-for-1 versus soft patching in the console? Vote early, vote often. I don't get a vote, and so we got one more. We're all okay. All the votes are in, and this is going to be interesting because we're going to talk about patching, which is really geeky, like super geeky, but it's also a workflow thing. So that's kind of an interesting topic. So yeah, the winner was patching. Do you patch 1-to-1 all the way through? Do you just soft patch in the console or soft patch back and forth, or what's your preference and why do you care? Anybody want to jump in immediately from the beginning? Strong feelings? Go, Ike.
I have strong feelings, and in fact, that was another topic that I had suggested. So,
I has feelings about most things, and that's part of the reason why we like, because it is the opinion show. That's the point. So having strong feelings is why if you don't have strong feelings about something, then why are you here? Like, yeah. So what do you think, Ike? What should we actually be doing?
Just off the record, which is on YouTube now, Brian and I had a conversation about this before I started because sometimes my opinions are a little bit out there for some people and they find it challenging. So I'm glad to have this forum and to be able to put them out there in relatively supportive space, and maybe people go, yeah, that could work. Because the one thing I'll tell you is everything I tell you has worked. I've done it. But anyway, so patching one-to-one. I strongly believe in patching one-to-one. Soft patching in a console, sure, if you need to fix something in a hurry or something, go for it. But to go, look, I don't really care what the input list is, just do whatever you're going to do and I'll sort it out when it gets to my end. I don't agree with that, because when it comes time to troubleshooting, uh, to be able to say, well, there's a problem with input one, and for everybody to go, well, input one, how? Who's input one? Well, I mean, the first number on the first channel on the first stage box in the chain. Um, and as an RF guy, I always typically had, early on it was say a dozen or 16 channels or whatever, and they were RF 1 through 16. So if there was a problem and someone saying, hey, I'm not getting RF 11, you know where to look. But after the soft patching thing became a thing, it just suddenly it was like, oh, well, I have that in 32. And it's like, well, good for you. But I mean, like, is the
It's
problem
still
at the
RF11.
back of the receiver, or is it is it in someone's cross patch, or where is it? Right. So um, that's why I strongly believe in one-to-one patching. I have an anecdote, but we could come back to that after some other people.
Oh yeah, no, there's plenty of show. No, actually, one of the things that I got kind of taught early on, or no, I don't want to say taught, but like one of the tricks was, we had all these sub snake boxes, and they were all labeled 1 through 12, and Dave knows what I'm talking about, and I think it was Alan Hennig or somebody who was like, no, before we start, this is going to be 1 through 12. Everything else is going to have tape on it, and it's going to be labeled. This one is this, and this one is not ABC. Like, that's not enough. I don't want anybody to be plugging into a thing and it's like, it's 3. Is it C3 or is it B3 or is it which 3 is it? Like, I've got the B3 plugged into D4, and like, no, like, put the channel names and trying to keep things as consistent as possible. I've gotten, I still to this day, like, I will make A2s if it's on the other end of the snake, or I'll do it behind the console, like reverse cables rather than reverse it in my console by patching it, because otherwise, when you go to troubleshoot, it's like, why is this and why is it coming out the left? No, the right is the left. I'm like, no, just move the wire. But I have a feeling we're all going to come down on this in the same place, but that's fine. We can all agree. It's fine. Chris.
Well, to further from an RF standpoint, in the corporate world, I don't care what's on the show, start my RF at 1. So if I have a 10-pack of wireless, 12-pack of wireless, whatever it is, I'll leave however many channels open for my RF. That way, no amount of labeling, if you say it's RF3, RF5, I know instantly which channel it is on the desk. And so I know a lot of people who start off, with maybe the lecterns first on 1 and 2, but then RF1 is now channel 3, and it's like no. RF1 is channel 1, RF2, yeah. So that's just a habit I've gotten into. So yeah, but cross patching on the output side, though, I'll get sloppy in terms of doing random places, and especially in Dante world, it's just, throw it here, throw it here, throw it here. But on the input side, definitely a 1-for-1 thing for sure.
Well, and the thing is, I too will do the same thing and then regret it later. It's like, because I didn't write it down. It was like, I've only got 3 things I got to patch to. And then it turns into 4 things, which then turns into 5 things, which then turns into 6 things. And it's just like, crap, which outputs did I already use and which holes did I already go to? And, which again, then forces me back to try to be consistent, like try to be, but yeah, the RF thing, I was kind of doing that. And I think, after I started working with you, Chris, I think I sort of like completely like focused in on for corporate stuff. In fact, I have a standard CLQL show file I use now, and it's like 16 channels or something of, it's designed to fit into a QL1. So it's, but it's like 16 channels of RF and then like 8 channels of playback stuff. And, but it's all just sort of laid out. And then if I have a show and it's only got 10 RF, well, then I'll just make a custom fader layer that just has those 10 RF. But everything else is just always laid out in the same. And then if somebody says, oh no, we need to add more channels of wireless, I just put it in 11 and 12 and change my custom fader layer. Like, it's still all the same. It's all the other, and then I'll stop talking. My other like pet peeve is RF, has to be 1 through whatever, regardless of what the transmitter is. It's like, don't give me Lav 1 and handheld 1. No.
I was just going to go there.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were. So elaborate, Pete, on my point, because...
Very first thing I think that a wise man once told me when I was early in on special events and broadcasting corporates is you keep those numbers all in order. It's handheld 13 if that's your first handheld, not handheld 1, and or it's RF 13, which is a handheld or whatever. But you don't say RF 13 handheld 1.
No.
You could say RF 13 somebody's vocal mic, but
right.
Yeah, and the soft patch thing, when you're dealing across platforms, so like different stage rack configurations, that's where it really gets important. So you have to make a decision like, if the splitters are 56 channel, which is sort of the standard, the analog splitters. If the analog splitters are 56 channel, but some stage racks are 56, some stage racks are 48, some stage racks are 64, some stage racks are 84. So and then if you have multiple stage racks per desk, if you can get away with it, I'll truncate the 64s down this 56. Right. Especially like in a festival situation. In a special event situation where everything's mapped out on paper, it kind of matters less because it's written down. But that brings me to my next point is some sort of live updated document, Google Docs or Office Online or something, because, we used to do I used to do binders because shows didn't really change that much. It was analog consoles or 5Ds, which were still analog basically as far as patching is concerned. And you kind of had everything dialed in before you went to the gig. Now, we're getting information on the plane on the way to the gig a lot of times. And the amount of signal paths on jobs have like quadrupled since like I first started, because like intercom is now all 4-wire and those are just paths and all of that stuff. So like having an online document to document is actually for me way more important than any process of soft patching or hard patching cross-referencing those channels does make it easier if you say, corporate desk 1, channel 1 is RF1, truck desk channel 1 is RF1, monitor desk channel 1 is RF1, but maybe the monitor desk is the band, but maybe it's channel 1 on that second stage rack or something,
Right.
And then if you have like MADI routers or if you have MADI to Dante bridges, trying to keep those numbers 1-to-1 is way easier, even with patch paperwork,
Oh, times 100. And I mentioned it just now, but it's kind of become a little bit of a pet peeve of mine now. Like when I A2, I will look askance at the A1 when they're like, oh, I'll just cross patch it. I'm like, you can make a fader layer that does whatever it is that is in your brain, but my patching will still be the same. And that's going to be a lot easier to trace later. Like if you want to move, channel 37 to be on your first layer and come into 15 or whatever, go for it. Like that's fine. Just move. But I really want 37 to go into a thing that says 37 on this end and go into your channel 37. And
because you want to leave room for it's just like using special features in products. Or some sort of noise reducer or feedback eliminator, any of those magical pieces, you don't start with it. you use it when you need to later on. And same thing with soft patching, I feel, is, you know, why boggle it up in the prep or in the first setup of it or the planning of it? Because you may need to do it later, and then it's okay. If it's, you know,
Right.
a festival, bands on stage, and all of a sudden that microphone is in the wrong spot, yeah, sure. In the heat of the moment to land it where you need to, you want to leave room for that last minute, those
Yeah,
last
like
minute
if the
adjustments.
overheads are backwards or something like that.
Totally, yeah, like absolutely, yeah. Snare top and bottom is backwards, and you know, monitors have already sound checked, and it's a festival, and you just want to make it right now, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or a channel quit, you know, and it's like backup mic, and you know, I'm halfway through the show, and I've got all my EQ on this channel, so I'll just change that to a different input. Yeah, I mean, like again, it's to me, it's fine if it's a problem solver in the heat of the moment later on, but if you're just doing it from the beginning as the way that you're just doing your plan, you know, because yeah, the channel counts. Once we got consoles that, you know, it wasn't like basically 8 channel, you know, you figure an 8-foot console was about 48 channels, so you know, 6 foot, you know, 6 channels per foot. You know, so we got to about that number, and then it's like we can't fit the console anymore, and that kept us in a window. Like, it kept us kind of under control. But then when it became, oh yeah, no, we can put 96 channels in a, you know, 4-foot space. Oh, now we can put 256 channels in a 4-foot space. Then it just became, oh, just add channels.
You know, that thing that a console is still about this wide and has about this many faders on it and this many meters on it. On the last tour that I did, when I really got on quite well with the monitor guy and really started talking a lot, and I forget how many channels there were in there, but it was like hundreds. And you know, you get the idea of something that's about that big is about 48 or 56 channels or something like that. And it's just like everything else nowadays, it's really kind of a picture of something, but it's not really what the thing is. It's so you could have easily, like, I think go into Dave Rittenhouse's shirt, I think it's 384 is the number now on like the Digico Monster engines or something like that. It's a lot of inputs. I saw something on that tour I'd never seen on a piece of paperwork before, which was aux 64 on the monitor list. aux 64. I was like, that's a thing. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, it's true that the expansion into the sort of digital world where you can have almost an unlimited number of channels, it's something that looks like a 48 channel console. And I've also seen like producers and talent and conductors and all that go, oh, well, just, you know, just bring up a fader, bring up a mic. And it's like, it's not really how that works anymore, you know. But anyway, someone else.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing, Brian, is you're talking about those old boxes. I can distinctly remember quite vividly getting one of those boxes, and I knew it was marked by you because it had pink console tape. So, yeah, I always knew when you had marked a box.
Yep. He's called me out. That is 100% true. In fact, it's within reach, but I'm not gonna. There is pink tape within reach of me. Actually, perfect. There is pink tape on my mouse.
Yeah.
So I still use the same because nobody uses that. So it's like, if I mark everything with pink tape, then everybody knows it was me. But yeah, that would have been true. And well, and they would buy, you know, artist tape, and they would just buy all the colors. So it's like the rack would be full of all the colors. Nobody ever took the pink. So I always had like access to infinite amounts of tape because nobody ever took the pink. So yeah, that is true. You can take from that what you will, whether it's because I was trying to be original, or I had an affection for pink, or I just wanted to always have access to tape.
Yeah, one good thing with newer consoles, I mean, I agree with doing 1-to-1 as close as you can ever get. Always go 1-to-1. With newer consoles, the one thing I like is if you do soft patch, there is a line that tells you exactly what stage box and what channel that is in. And then even if you do soft patch, you can still go, oh, it is originally from here. Now, I'm not saying that allows you to just go nuts with it, but you can, nowadays, you can get yourself back to 1-to-1 quicker.
And those same consoles, Dave, also it should be mentioned that most of them have some sort of feature you can turn on where if you hold a button down on the channel, it'll actually light up the LEDs on that head amp. The Yamahas there's it's a select. The Digicos have an option. Avid has, the newer ones all. I mean, back with like some of the other desks, I would like, which one is the 48 volt blinking on? Now they've like took that node and actually have written it into the code to identify quicker.
I remember being on something with you, Pete, and we've only worked a few shows together, but I do remember it was literally we were doing a trace and you were just turning on and off the phantom power. It's like, which one is it blinking on? Okay, there you go. It's
That's
that
the one. Yeah.
That was the manual version of the same thing.
Totally.
Like, does anybody? There's been a whole bunch of, and Dave will remember these, but because I made a bunch of them. But I know Dave Rat makes them and markets them. But the little phantom power tester that's like in a connector thing, and it would be, back in the analog days, we would just use phantom as a line tester. It's like you plug the thing at the end and you go, nope, 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 yep. Oh, it's 33. It's 33, and you turn it off. It's like the old analog version of the same thing, like tracing through all of the subsnakes to get to whatever. I think back to those things that I made, Dave. Like I've seen online now a bunch of versions of the same thing. Sorry for the shorthand for anybody else that's watching this later, but it was just basically it was a little male XLR connector with two little LEDs wired from pin 1 to pin 2 and from pin 1 to pin 3, a red one and a green one. So basically, if you apply phantom power, both lights light up if the line's good. If one of the legs is gone, it's green. If one of the legs is gone, it's red. So you could know which leg was gone, and you could use it as a quick and dirty, plug it into a line, turn phantom power on, and if it comes on when they turn the phantom power on. But I didn't put any resistors in it. I didn't put any it was.
There's a thread about that right now on the PSW forum, and it's got wiring diagrams and everything, and
which are all so much better than mine. Like mine was so rudimentary, but thank God that in this, I didn't even know this. Somebody in that thread mentioned it, that in the phantom power spec are current limiting resistors. So like every console
6.8K1 1% precision resistor, sir.
Which I knew Ike would remember. I just knew that it was a current limiting resistor. I can't remember the number. Which definitely, because I probably would have blown up a bunch of mic pre's with my silly little rudimentary thing. But the nice thing was I made a bunch of them and I just always had one in my pocket, just no matter what, just quick line test. Could throw out a subsnake, put phantom on all 12 channels, doom, 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 doom. They're all working. All the legs are good. Moving on.
If I went through one of my old work boxes, there's still one sitting there.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. I don't think I have any more left, but Ed.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say these days I do that with my Q box all the time. I bob through and just use my Q box. A lot of times too, with my Q box, I'll listen to just pin 2 or pin 3 if something sounds funky, and find out if you have a dead leg if you're not sending phantom. Useful to do those kinds of things. But getting back to patching, I go 1-to-1 whenever possible. That's kind of how it is. But I'm not afraid to soft patch. And I think Brian, you'd said you'll have people reverse wires. And I will absolutely do that until I get the guy on the crew who I wouldn't trust to switch my wires. and unfortunately,
real talk. Now we're getting to real talk because this is the reality we live in.
Right.
It's like, it's like there's the I'm on the 300 channel show with everybody on the crew's got 25 years of experience and they're all sober, and then there's the reality that we sometimes live in, which is I'm getting signal and I dare not let them touch it again. No.
Exactly. And then also, like, every once in a while well, I guess now not so much, but when I was getting coming up to an X32 or an M32, sometimes it was just easier to soft patch everything because their routing is
Screwy.
yes. So yeah, I mean, if you have to soft patch, great. I know some people who are super comfortable and that's just their workflow. And to me, I'm like, I don't know why you want to make it harder for yourself and for your A2 if something's going wrong, but I'll always go 1-to-1. I'm huge on labeling. When I'm doing festival patch, I try to first come up with an input that makes sense for most of what acts we're going to get, and with some open channels so we can throw those mystery things in. But yeah, I can't stand when there's a handful of sub snakes and all of them are just labeled 1 through 12,
Right.
with a different color of tape on them.
Right.
And it's like, no, let's just call them what they are.
Yeah, no, the number of like painful, like shows that I've been on where I'm just on comms for whatever reason because I'm doing something else. So I'm not, and it's like, yeah, it's, red 5, well, that's coming up on 137 for me. Well, that's coming up on, stage rack 4B3 for me. And it's like, but, and it just hurts me. And it's just like, anyway, yeah, it's a bit of a rant, which is, I think that, well, and probably for Ike too, since he's the one that originally suggested this unbelievably geeky topic. But it does actually go back to how much of our jobs ultimately are just basic organization and like, like they're really not technical. It's really like the most important things often are just, how do you organize your show? How do you lay out the stuff on your console so that you can get to the things that you need to get to as quickly as, so like, Ike, when you said earlier, said something about, oh yeah, you get the sudden person saying, bring up the flutes or whatever, being able to foresee that question so that the flutes is on a layer that you can get to very quickly, we're in the organization team as much as
it's self-preservation. I mean, this came up in the prepping RF webinar that I did for Practical Show Tech the other day. Is like, for me, I'm really, really uncomfortable if I land in a situation where it's just chaos. Right. And so much of what I do is trying to make things not be chaos so that I could be comfortable doing it. And I think a lot of us have that same sort of OCD streak. And as a result, that's why we get along. And that's why this audio opinion show is so incredibly boring, because we're all agreeing with each other. But just kidding. But yeah, I mean, that's why I do it, is because, people ask me, well, what happens if you get into an RF situation and it's, like just everything's going to hell? And it's like, never been there, man. Right. I've heard about it. Right. I haven't been there.
The plan is to make that not happen. That's
I have a quick question. With the color coding, has anyone done it a different way with using letters? Like, what if you're working with somebody who's actually colorblind?
Those are typically lighting designers, Pete, but no,
I mean, when I was in Massachusetts,
sorry, I just want to say I invented the Braille swatch book back when gels were a thing. But sorry, that was unkind.
Yeah, no, I'm actually a big fan of letters, and you do have to like and every once in a while I've come across colorblind people, and then it's all of the color coding for all of the cables in the cable trunk suddenly pose a problem because
exactly,
I mean, it's totally legit. Like, I mean, I could see it. Like, that's, man, what a pain in the butt that must be.
I did. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I think there's a place for both. But typically, when I would do color and letters, because Letters more for the reference, but color is definitely visually faster when you're throwing together stages and quickly trying. If I put on my, at least my old splitters, the colors of each Veeam connector or whatever, like that's going to be faster than looking at whatever, right? And then yes, the letters help. Color coding, I know a lot of the traditionally older rock and roll companies went with the resistor code. By default, since I started out somewhat in Maryland Sound, we had a completely different random color code, and I'll never forget it.
Great idea for an audio opinion show, and that is resistor color code or the wrong color code.
Right. So we did red, white, blue, yellow, green, gray. Like I don't know what the reason of that was, but it's ingrained in my head.
Red, white, and blue, man.
Yeah, but the annoying thing though is red, white is backwards from left, right. So if you were to label things red, white, normally you would have done left first. And so it confuses you when you think about what your priority there is. But red, white, blue, yellow, green, gray, like all our fly malts were labeled those colors. It's just ingrained into my head. So
I've got a great one about that when it deals with somebody that we all know, a nice Englishman who always would do red, white, blue. And why? Because it was the colors of Her Majesty's flag. But when you did inserts on a analog console, it would go red, white, and white was the return, which always threw me off because red would be return.
Return, RR, yeah.
His was not. So the first time I ever patched a 4K for him, all the inserts were backwards.
Yeah, and I would have done exactly the same thing, like absolutely exactly the same thing. Well, it's ingrained in me that red is 2 because that's the resistor color code is 2, and it's also right, so left, right, it's 2. Like, almost any of the other colors I can kind of be okay
Even
with.
cable manufacturers followed the resistor color code.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, Dave and I came out with the same, the same hotbed of silliness. But the one thing that they used resistor color code to color code everything, ish. There's always an ish in there because they used white for 1, which, if I recall correctly, it's black is 1, isn't it, or something? Or there was something in there. Or
brown is 1.
Brown is 1, yeah, and so they were, they changed it because reasons. So everything else was consistent, but white was 1 for some reason. So there you go.
Which unfortunately, white is always is what's used the most, and so it's left on every cable. So using white, I try to stay away from using white for anything, just because it's always left. It's always left on cable. So it's
marker tape. Yeah.
I had a friend who, when using the Canair speaker cable, which was red and white twisted pairs, wanted white to be hot. And it was like, well, what's the reasoning behind that? Well, something that's white hot is hotter than something that's red hot. And it's like, that is absolutely true.
There's a logic.
But every amplifier has a red terminal for the hot, and every speaker has a red terminal for the hot. And let's leave JBL out of this for a minute. But, so maybe we could hook up the red wire to the red terminal and not have this, rethink going. And it was like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. But it took a little bit of a negotiation to get there. The other thing about color codes, early on, I did some folk festivals where they were trying to dumb it down, where they were color coding everything so that the volunteers didn't have to know anything. They could just, plug in the red mic, and it was like, it was chaos on every changeover. And I came up with this thing, which was like, we all have going in, volunteer or not, people typically know how to count, and they know where right and left are, if you get reasonably good volunteers. So if I say to you, where's red? Can you point to red? That's a problem. But if I say, where is stage right? you know, you can point to stage right, you know, what's higher, 1 or 2, you know, 3 or 4, you know, and they're getting into this thing of, you know, does yellow come before red or does red come? It's, you know, they can be a good visual aid once you have everything organized, but to just depend on a color code independently of everything else, I have huge issues with that.
Well, Chris and I did a fairly large event that we didn't do this year that had a whole bunch of little sub-snakes spread all throughout a very large convention floor. And as I recall, all of those little 4-channel sub-snakes coming in were both color-coded and letter-coded, which did make it extreme. Like, I walked in and had to plug in the other end, and it took it was just like super, and it was great because it was like color for color to plug in the ends into the rack I needed to plug in. But then later on, if we had to troubleshoot a channel, you know, rather than going magenta or puce or something, because there was a bunch of them, so there was a bunch of different colors, you could say, you know, number 3 on K, and it was very obvious which ones that you were talking about. You know, I guess if we had wanted to be really specific, we could have like broken it out to, well, I guess we sort of kind of did. It was like, you know, A was 1 through 4 and B was 5 through 8 and 6.
Yeah, we didn't start over the numbers with each letter. It was still, you know, yeah, like you said, we K 12 through whatever. Yeah, the number still increased. Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, so again, it was very specific. It's like, you know, the specific microphone number was on the sub-snake, which came into my console as those channels, which were those things, which was, you know, because it was like 50 of them spread throughout this hall, and, you know, it would have been way too easy to get them confused if you didn't be very specific about the way that you label them. David, you're the only one that we haven't heard from, and I would love to know what you think about colors and numbers or whatever else you want to talk about. Don't even care.
Yeah, as far as the color blindness thing goes, a lot of my world tends to be where that comes in as touchscreens. So if we're putting in a touchscreen controller in a stadium suite or somewhere, occasionally we'll actually take that graphic and upload it to a website that does simulations of how the various color blindness would view that screen. And that can really help point out, like, if it's a mute that changes between red and green, that can sometimes be a problem. So that's one thing that we've looked at. Bouncing back to the patching stuff, if I am in a big stadium and it's got a bunch of analog infrastructure, if you know, and say you've got this digital console and it's going through a 48-point patch bay, and you plug into channel 37, and if it doesn't come up into channel 37, that's very confusing. So when we get into the new installations where there is no patch bay, because I'm not putting those in now that everything's Dante, I do kind of deviate from the 1-to-1 occasionally, just because most of my inputs aren't coming from a stage box anyway. So if I do have a stage box, that's 1-to-1. But then after that, my Dante controller kind of looks like a mess, just because things are coming from all over the place.
Although you bring up a great point, and I actually was helping somebody put together their Dante rig just last week, and it wasn't ultimately that big a system, but they had lots of those little Studio Technologies 2 and 4 channel Dante boxes. So there was a lot of stuff, like a lot of Dante devices, and he had just kind of plugged them all in and let them name themselves or whatever. And so it was, you know, Yamaha TF5, and then Studio Technologies this, and then this weird thing, and then this other weird thing, and then this other, like, in this completely. And I said, okay, before we patch anything, you need to come up with a naming scheme that organizes things. So, you know, and you can do it whatever makes the most, whatever. And he kept saying, well, how do you want me to label it? And I said, whatever is the most intuitive. It was basically, I was helping him wire up his, a TV truck. And, you know, and he owned the truck. He was like, you're the one that's going to be in this. what is the most intuitive thing for you? Is it more intuitive that like devices are the same than that, or like departments, or like, but just, start with a letter or something so they organize. And, so all of your bits for me, it's like I want all my consoles, and I want all my consoles in one place. I want all my Rio boxes. I want all my, and I want them to increase, and I want them to be named something really, really obvious, like stupidly obvious, like exactly what it is or where it is or what it's doing or whatever. And I will, like, if I've got more than 3 devices on a Dante network, the very first thing I think about is how do I name all these things so that later on I don't get lost, because you can't change the names later because it breaks all your patches.
Hey Brian,
that's-
do you do console ID 1 and then Rio ID 2?
Yes.
Not console 1, Rio 1.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's mostly just because it's just helps my brain. Like, I'm fully aware of the fact that I can, if I had so many of them that I had to have, duplicate 1s and 2s and whatever, like if I had 4 CL5s and 20 Rios or something, I might not. But typically if it's, 1 or 2 consoles and 3 or 4 Rios, it's like I want CL5 1, CL5 2, Rio 3, Rio 4, Rio 5, Rio.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the places where the production world and the IT world kind of butt heads, because for us, the physical, like I run into this with IP addresses of units in my racks, and then you open up WSM or Workbench or whatever, and it goes, oh, I'm just going to put this here and this here and this. It's like, no, I want IP address number 1 to be unit number 1 in the topper rack, and number 2 and so on and so forth. And in the IT world, it makes absolutely no difference at all if Mary's computer is, this IP address, and Dave's computer is that IP address, and the office printer is that IP address. The physical location of stuff means absolutely nothing to them, because it could be, on the 17th floor and the 3rd floor and the 12th floor, or 2 miles away on the other side of the campus. It means nothing to them, but to us, it's really important to have something that means something that's physically someplace somewhere, because we need to get to it. So that's a thing. And if we have time, the anecdote that got me,
I'm gonna let Chris say because I know he's chaining right off of what you're gonna say, but I promise you, I'll get back to it.
Well, you reminded me of the IP address is the thing that makes no sense, but made sense for us. So our amp racks at MSI were 5 deep amps. And so rack 1 was 11 through, like the last octet was 11 through 15, second rack 20. So we've burned numbers, but it's okay. But you knew if I need to, in high QNet or whatever, if I needed to find an amplifier, I could say, if I just said amp 32, you knew it's in rack 3, amp 2, so in the, like I said, IT world doesn't matter, but for us, no paperwork was needed. All I had to say was number 32, you knew exactly where that amp was. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm in the process of, although it looks like for various reasons I may have to put it on a 4-month hold. That's another story. But I'm in the process of building up a pretty big, for a house anyway, bunch of junk. And yeah, one of the things that I'm, kind of having to think through is exactly this thing, Ike, which is, how do I IP address things so that it is the most intuitive way for me to find it later when I'm looking for something. I don't want to have to go look for a lookup table to find I want to be able to know that .5 whatevers are all Mac Minis, and .6 whatevers are all, CL5.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever.
Absolutely.
How do I do this to where it's as intuitive as possible, and then, from top to bottom, they go in numerical order. From left to right, they go in numerical. I mean, it all sounds silly, but we all know, when I have to figure out what's broken, every freaking second counts. If I have to, and the more I have to think about it, the more flustered I get, which makes it harder for me to figure it out, because I'm getting flustered because I can't figure out what it is. And,
Yeah, because it doesn't have to do with intelligence. It has to do with the fact that your brain is dialed in on whoever's on stage at the time, whoever's on intercom with you at the time, and the timing of you needing to switch something out. And so keeping things simple and organized, that means that you don't need to reserve brain power to remember that thing. All you know that that thing is 21 and it's 21 in those 3 places, and you can reserve that brain power for more important things in that time frame.
In that moment. Ike, I have a feeling that's a good segue for whatever your story was.
Sure. So speaking of stadiums and all of this other stuff, it was 2006. It was at the Rogers Center in Toronto. It was a big show. It was a gala for this international medical conference that was in Toronto. Bill and Melinda Gates, keynote speaker, blah, 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 bunch of bands. And so first of all, the stage was huge. It was like easily 2 stories high. It was so tall that the monitor desks had to be put back some distance from the stage because they couldn't see the deck from down below. So as a result of that, RF World was closer to the stage, and usually it's the other way around. So I was in the tier closest to the stage. Those guys were behind me. And there are various other things that happened on the show, but anyway, it was all going quite well. We got to the changeover for one act, and I always listen to Show Call or Tech Channel, whatever. And so I'm listening on intercom, and I'm hearing they're doing their line check, and it's got this, bass guitar, amp, nope, bass guitar, nope. Okay, come back to it, but I go through everything else, and they don't have the bass, and it's getting closer and closer to like the go time. And finally somebody says, like, the hell with it, we go. So I grab RF7, the spare handheld, on a boom stand, and I go pelting up those 2 flights of stairs, and I go tearing over, and the bass amp happened to be on stage left where I was, and I stick into the SVT cabinet, and I go pelting back downstairs, and I get to my rack, and I have the satisfaction of seeing the A's on the receiver, bouncing around like a bass guitar signal looks like on LEDs. And I get on the intercom, go, hey guys, bass guitar is covered, it's on RF7. And then I hear this little pause, and they go, RF7. I didn't take that in this patch. And so, no, I didn't take that either. And it was like, at that point, that's when I changed my policy. Like, I'm good to the XLR in the back of the receiver, and then you're on your own from there. Because, and that's kind of what inspired this topic of, 1-to-1 versus soft patches. Right. It used to be, when it was all analog, that all of the RF channels show up on the console, and whether you turn them up or not was your business, but they were all there. And something happened like this, in an emergency, you could go, oh yeah, I could push the fader and push the mute or on or off button, whatever it was, and have it there. And this whole thing of just go, well, I didn't take that in this patch. It was like wow, we're going down a dark different road here.
Dark passages.
You're muted, Brian.
Am I muted, or am I just not working?
I hear you.
You hear me now? Okay. I think Ike's signal might be losing it, but because at the end of your story was getting a little broken up, but we definitely got the point, and that was pretty much a good wrap up.
Brian, you hear us, because we cannot hear you.
You do not hear me at all?
We got you, Brian.
You got me?
I hear you, Brian.
All right, so it's just Ike's problem. But yeah, I think I will go ahead and wrap us on that story, because that was actually a pretty good, kind of segue to the end. Because yeah, I mean the bottom line is like, keep it simple. I put a little post there's a little article in a couple of magazines ago now, Live Sound International, and one of several little things that I put in there was just like, do things in the most intuitive, simplest way that you possibly can, because being clever and cute doesn't get you extra points. It just makes it confusing. And I was somebody who liked clever and cute when I was younger, and yeah, I didn't get extra points. It just made things confusing. But I think with that, I think we'll call it. Go ahead, Ed. Did you have something to add? Please.
Yeah, I mean, on that keep it simple thing, I also always think the what if I'm hit by a bus scenario.
Yep.
If I get hit by a bus, can the A2 walk up and mix? Can somebody just walk up and be able to jump into it? And if you've done some really sophisticated routing, we'll say, maybe somebody couldn't just hop in and take over if
Yeah, no, that's kind of there's been times with QL consoles where I've like done weird double patching things and whatever because of the way the insert points work, and I can't get but I still try to make it so that if I fell over on my main layer, if you push up this thing, the thing that says is supposed to go up comes up and comes out of all the places. Like, even if I've done something weird farther down, that at least, it's all very intuitive on the top. So I think with that, we'll call it a show. And I thank you guys for joining me. I thank everybody on YouTube's, and I think we'll say goodbye to our friends on YouTube if I can make that work.
Yeah, well, that's like just your opinion, man.